Hello chess friends and welcome to the Art of Chess channel and welcome back to the Tata Steel Masters in 2022. So we're now already in the round 8 of the super event, and in the round 8, in my opinion, the best game was the game between Vidit Santosh Gujrathi against Nils Grandelius. So Vidit lost his game yesterday against Jordan van Forest, messed up his chances for him winning this tournament because Vidit was leading through the whole time now in the tournament. But now with the win he could also make something happen because Magnus Carlsen only played at the draw. So if for instance Vidit wins this game, then he would be only half of the point behind the world champion Magnus Carlsen. So let's check out what happened. In my opinion, this was the most attractive game from the round 8. So here Vidit opened with the move d4. Nils Grandelius responds with knight to f6. We have knight to f3, and now after move g6 we have sort of a idea here by black. Black can still be flexible, can go into the king's Indian, can go also into the greenfield defense. So black with the move g6 has a really flexible play. So here knight to d2, and this is now a tricky variation. In my opinion, the most correct way here is to play the move d5 because you're not allowing your opponent to play the move e4, and then of course you can go into some greenfield structures like bishop to g7, and even c5 would be then an opportunity here for black, because this setup of knight to d2 is perfectly fine for white. Of course you're controlling some centralized squares, but I don't like simple fact here that you're standing in the way of your own bishop. So okay, but here bishop to g7 was played, and here Nils Grandelius is basically allowing now Vidit to play the move e4, getting of course a central control. And okay, you could play something like d6, but again Nils Grandelius played a tricky line. He castles now, and he's again inviting here Vidit Gujrathi to take over in the center. He's telling him, okay, you can play the move e5, you can get the tempo against the knight, but when you do that, then your pawn's getting exposed. And many times when you play the move e5 like Vidit played, of course here he gets now his space control in the center of the board. The problem then afterwards is sometimes to protect your space advantage, because this pawn will be broken with the move d6, will be also broken with the move f6. So knight to e8 in my opinion would be too passive here for black. That's why Nils Grandelius of course didn't play it, because if that happens, I think white can immediately launch a flank attack, because when you lose a little bit the protection of the h5 square, then I think a normal flank attack is the best idea here for white. So that's why knight to e8 is actually too passive. So that's why Nils Grandelius played knight to h5. He's blocking at least the potential progress h5, h4, h5 immediately of whites. But here Vidit Gujrathi played the normal idea g4. The problem about this move for black is after knight to f4 that the knight is a little bit loose on the board. And okay, here knight to e4, the knight gets attacked, you have to step back with your knight, and we have now a beautiful defensive move d5. d5 is liberating line now for black, because for instance if you take of course the bishop to f4, then also black will take d takes e4, and you still lose the tempo here against the knight. You could play maybe knight to g5 in order to attack the e4 pawn, but the problem is, as I said, your pawn chain in the center gets suddenly broken, because c5 is now opening the position in the center, and white's king is still stuck in the center. So white has now huge positional problem. So after move d5, as we said, you could also try here maybe e takes d6, but actually this move is also not working here for white, because you get simply knight to d5, and the problem is now you get again challenged, but the problem is again your knight is a little bit loose on the board, the king is stuck in the center, and whatever you do, if you play something like d takes c7, you're inviting again your opponent's pieces into the game. Queen to c7 happening, you see now here bishop to g4 can happen. So white exposed himself, I think, here too much. Black's pieces are suddenly playing really in a beautiful harmony, and the most important thing is again to recognize black king is secured, white king is not. And I think with the bishop's activity, with the centralized knight, by including this knight into the game, black can simply attack further the position. So that's why after move d5 here Vidit played the normal move knight to g3, kept the center locked, which is very important about, but now again the knight is hanging. After move knight to e6 now comes a beautiful move here by Vidit. He played now the move knight to f5. because if you play g takes f5, then of course g takes f5 happens, and the problem is now this knight is also trapped. So the only way to make something out of this position is of course to take knight takes d4, but now after knight to d4, here black actually after bishop to e5 would get into huge position problems, because you can get this one, bishop to h6, and the problem is now if you step back of course from the g file attack, then you lose simply the rook. If you play of course a rook to e8, then again the problem is rook to g1, and you have to retreat with your king. But now with the move knight to f3, the bishop gets challenged, and even if you try bishop to f6, you may protect this for a while, but now with knight to g5, I think white is simply winning the game, because there is also the threat knight takes f7. This would be immediate check. You are forced here even to give up your powerful bishop to g5, rook to g5, and you see now black is in huge problems because of the star square weaknesses. So that's why, as we said, after move knight to f5, g takes f5 is not working. So here, that's why Nils Grandelius played now to move c5, challenges again the d4 pawn, and when this pawn is taken, then of course the e5 becomes also a long-term weakness. So that's why knight takes g7. This is a good choice by Vidit. He's taking now the very important bishop. We have knight takes g7. If you take with the king to g7, then the problem is again, I think, this early flank attack. h4, you can maybe try f6, but now with h5, h6, I think there is now a beautiful way to open the position. Even g5, I think, could be working here. You want here from white's perspective just to open the position against black's king. So here knight to g7, that's why knight takes g7. We have h3 here by Vidit Gujrathi. He's of course protecting his g4 pawn. Now he's at least trying to do some f4 f5 attacks. That was now the main idea here. The bishop has of course a beautiful diagonal, maybe also include this bishop into the game. So again, white is trying to launch a flank attack on the king side. So we have c takes d4, we have bishop to h6, we have queen to a5, and now queen to d2. Here Nils Grandelius at least found a way how to simplify the position. I think a simplification idea here is good for black, because we have to say, I think, when black gave up the dark square bishop for the knight, it was now huge problem, because if the queen, for instance, somehow, not immediately, but the queen could actually come into the game and maybe threaten even some checkmates here on g7. So that's why getting rid of the queens, I think, is a good choice here of black. So after move queen to d2, we have queen takes d2, knight to d2, knight to c6, and here f4. So okay, this is playable now for both sides. The d4 is of course a long-term weakness, that's not the point, but black can, I think, play a solid firm position, because of course, okay, white has advanced the pawns here on the king side, but there's nothing special going on anymore when the queens are off the board. So f6, this is a good move, opening the center and also challenging, as I said, the main space advantage that white has built here. So that's why we have e takes f6, e takes f6, and now queenside castling by Vidit. So rook to e8, we have knight to b3 attacking the pawn on d4, and now knight to e6. And this was now the first really mistake here by Nils Grandelius. There is now a beautiful defensive move which black can play. Maybe you can pause the video and try to see now really the best defensive move here for black. It's a beautiful tactical move that unfortunately Nils Grandelius missed, and gave, I think, here Vidit the opportunity to take really control now in the game, because after move knight to b3, the stunner actually would be bishop to f5, because after potential g takes f5, knight to f5 traps also the bishop. So it would be a liberating, really liberating line. Instead of maybe taking out the bishop, rook to g1 would be then idea, but now with bishop to e4, black can solve now all of the positional problems. You see the bishop is finally into the game. Look, this bishop was on such a bad square on c8. Now actually the bishop becomes the best minor piece of black. So it was now a huge opportunity for Nils Grandelius to cement the position somehow, but unfortunately he played knight to e6, and this gives now Vidit, of course, the opportunity to take over in the game. You see now the d5 is weak, the d4 pawn is weak. We have still the bishop pair from white's perspective on the board, so it's now comfortable game, I think, for Vidit. So knight to c7, we have now f5, we have g takes f5, and now rook from h to f1, we have king to f7. Probably f takes g4 would be a normal idea. Then the game leads into rook takes f6. You can take, but also with rook to bishop to f3, rook to g1. Here black is again in huge problems, but at least here in this position you're giving also some worries for white. At least you have this h3 pawn, which has to be, I think, further attacked. So it's maybe a line that also Nils Grandelius should have played. But okay, he played king to f7. We have g takes f5, rook to g8, and now after move rook to d2 again. Here Vidit Nils Grandelius played a new mistake. He played now the move knight to e5. There is again better move which black should have played. Again, try to pause the video and try to see now the best defensive move, which again unfortunately Nils Grandelius missed. Okay, again the move is bishop to f5. Really wild stuff. So instead of move knight to e5, bishop to f5 is the only move that I think gives black some kind of an opportunity. Again, Nils Grandelius should have played bishop to f5, so he had the opportunity to play this move twice in the game in order to defend himself, because after potential rook to f5, you have to play here king to g6, and you see now both of these pieces are hanging. You could maybe try to defend everything. You can play, of course, rook to f2, but now after king to h6, okay, you have your check. But now after rook to g6, in my opinion, this position is much more simplified. Okay, again, black has the weakness on d5, black has the weakness on d4, but I think here maybe black can hang on to this position and get a draw. But knight to e5 is not good, because here knight to d4 is happening and you don't gain anything. Now of course bishop to f5 is not working anymore, because the knight can of course take out. So the bishop is now far away from the action. That was now the most important thing here to recognize. Nils Grandelius had twice the opportunity to include the bishop into the game and unfortunately didn't play that. So bishop to d7, we have b3, rook from a to e8, we have a4, we have a6, and now bishop to f4. So this is now a beautiful setup, of course, for the bishop pair. The bishops are very well placed. They're controlling, of course, good diagonals. The rooks are on active files. The knight is centralized. What we actually want to do now is somehow maybe play the move c4 and open here the long diagonal for the light square bishop. So we have rook to e7, rook to f2, bishop to c6, and now king to b2, rook to d7, and here king to a3. Vidit is not rushing. That's now the good part about this game. He's not playing c4 immediately. He's first of course bringing these pieces on the back square. Also the king in endgames has to be included into the attack, so that's why king to a3 perfectly fine. We have knight to e8, and now after move c4 we have finally opened the position. Here probably the best way is simply to take d takes c4. After knight to c6, maybe you can takes, but the problem is now this one, knight to e5 is sort of a counter attack. You cannot take immediately, so you're pretty much forced before that to take here b takes c6. But this is a weird position. The bishops are becoming stronger and stronger in the game. So here after move c4, Nils Grandelius tried knight to g7, but now knight takes c6. We have b takes c6, a similar position happened. C takes d5, we have a rook to d8 by Nils Grandelius, and here after d takes c6 in this position, Nils resigned. Because what can happen, of course, you can take rook takes d2, rook takes, bishop takes, and now you could maybe march with the king towards the pawn. But now after move bishop to b4, you have to play again with the king. Then we have a new check, and now bishop to d5 simply wins the game, because the problem is now you cannot take out the pawn on f5. You get simply bishop to e6 and you lose the knight. So instead of this sequence, you could maybe try some ideas of rook to c8 to protect your c file, but the problem is now bishop to e5 happens, and after d takes e5 we have now this check. You have to again play ideas like king to f6, but now with c7 and bishop to b7, again there is a promotion here for white. So really beautiful game played by by Vidit Santosh Gujrathi. Congratulations. He is now, as I said, only half of the point behind Magnus Carlsen, and I'm not sure if the game between Shakhriyar, Mamedyarov and Praggnanandhaa ended in, I think that Shak should win the game, and then Magnus Carlsen and Mamedyarov would have 5.5 points on the point count, and Vidit would be on the third place with 5 points, which is a good result, I think, for the Indian top grandmasters. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed the game. I really enjoyed it a lot. Interesting lines here of some East Indian defenses. If you want to see more games from this tournament, check out my coverage so far with some great games that we have analyzed before. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.